She is one of television's most familiar faces, the vamp everyone loves to hate. Life was beautiful for Sudha Chandran until she was 16. And then a horrific bus accident brought everything to a standstill. And just when the world thought that her future had ended even before it had started, Sudha Chandran proved them wrong. Sudha, life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans, isn't it?
Quite true, actually. When I was 16, I just started dreaming about my life. I think 16 is the age when you actually decide what you want to do in life.
You were initiated into Bharatanatyam when you were only 3 years old.
Yes. It will be very untrue if I say at the age of 3 I decided I want to be a dancer, because at the age of 3 nobody can actually decide what you want to do. So it was what was decided for me by my parents. And I always thought that dance and my education and, you know, my IFS and life is going to be beautiful. And very unfortunate, because I was coming back from Trichy to Madras. We go there every year for our yearly pilgrimage, and we were coming back from there. And everything was wonderful because we had a wonderful darshan, and just about 40 kilometers from Trichy, there's a temple called Samepuram, which is the Devi's temple. And this driver, like in South, it's a practice. Before, they take on the night journey, they go to the temple and give their offerings. And he did that, and I was like, we were all awake, we were all talking. And suddenly, there was one bang. And before we even realized what was happening, and then, everybody was scattered. And it took us some time to realize that we had met with an accident. And, when you're not even prepared for it, you're so young. And I remember, because I was such a pampered child, I'd never seen the hard facts of life. For me, life was very rosy, because my parents made sure that I got the best in my life. So I remember when, I was on the streets, on the highway, and the driver was breathing his last on my lap. And he was asking me for water, and I didn't know from where to get water. And all that I could find was a banyan, and there was some, it was filth, I shouldn't be saying that, it was some gutter. All that I could do was just dip it there and put it into his mouth. But I still feel that, if I'm successful today, maybe that person must have blessed me, because I came in from nowhere to help him out.
What happened to you in the accident?
In fact, I was the only person who was quite okay there, because I just sustained a fracture in my right femur, which I realized when I tried to walk. I felt something was very wobbling around.
There was no pain?
I really didn't realize, because there was so much of happening all around, and it was an Amavasya ki Raat, so pitch dark. And suddenly I found these 4 boys. They gave me a splinter, they tied a banyan around me. They said, I think you've got a fracture. My mom was declared dead, and they told me, please sign her death certificate. And suddenly when I realized, I saw that she was breathing. She was given an overdose of sleeping pills. That was the time I realized she's alive, so we put her into the ambulance. My dad was bleeding through his nose. It took me 2 days to understand the fact that my parents were still alive.
When did you realize that your thigh bone had been fractured?
That I realized after the accident immediately. But as usual, the government hospitals, they just, sutured the wound and put a plaster of Paris. I had a small cut on my ankle, which had gone unnoticed. And that's where the gangrene set in. The root cause of the gangrene setting in was that small cut at the ankle. And it was fractured, so they put the plaster of Paris. And by the time my father could actually take control of the situation, it was almost about 2 weeks. And it was a police case, so we couldn't get an exit out of that place. Finally, my father decided to sign it. He took me out on my own risk. But then my family came in from Madras. Then he brought me to Madras. And by the time they opened I remember that day when I was admitted in Vijaya Hospital, Madras, and Dr. Derek D'Souza, who was attending on me, cut the POP, and he said, oh God, why did they do this? So I said, what happened? So he said, no. The doctor immediately takes control of the situation, but I knew at that time we were heading for disaster. It was 5th of June, 1981. When my mom came, she just looked at me and she went off. My dad came in, he held my hand, he says, Sudha, there is a news that I have to break to you. I said, yes. He says, tomorrow they're taking you into the operation theatre and they're going to amputate your leg. Suddenly I felt, it was like, I could relate my life today to the crash, September 11th crash, when the Twin Towers just came crashing down. For me, it was my life, it just went like that. I didn't know where I had to start from and where am I going to, and how long my parents will be able to sustain with me. See, everything in paper sounds beautiful, but for me, every day was a struggle. That 2 years, if I have to rewrite again, or relive again, I would never want to. Never again. Because once you become a successful story, these things, start going into the past, then they become very bleak. But if you ask to relive that again, it's very difficult.
So you read in the papers about Dr. Sethi and
Yes.
his Jaipur
And
fort.
yes, Dr. P.K. Sethi at that time was the national hero. So I wrote to him and I was really surprised because I got a reply within 2 days from Dr. P.K. Sethi. I went there and I went to meet him. And the moment I met him, I said, my first question was, Doctor, can I walk? But I don't know, when I saw him, I said, Doctor, can I dance? And he said, yeah, why not?
Was it something about him? Where did you get that
I really didn't
sudden
know.
bout of inspiration?
And it's so beautiful because when I met him, he gave me the Jaipur fort. I danced. 84, I was on stage. After the show, he came to me. He says, great, you did it. But how did you? I said, how did you? I said, Doc, you told me I could do it. He says, let me tell you today, when I saw your innocent face, I couldn't say no.
Sudha, but it was amazing that you went in for that dance performance with about 1,000 people in the audience. How did you feel before you actually just got on the stage with that Jaipur fort?
I was
to
not
do a dance
expecting 1,000
performance?
people, no.
500?
No, it was totally a family affair. And my father told me, well, there'll be about 20 people in the auditorium. And I remember when the curtain opened and I came on the stage, I had a standing ovation. The 1,000 people were standing and they were all clapping. I said, I have not achieved anything. They said, no. It was the attitude with which you came into the stage, say, go to hell, man, I'm back. I think that made me perform for 3 hours. And without realizing the fact that I had lost a leg. If I had to go kaput, everything would have collapsed. Dr. P.K. Sethi on his stand, my guru on his stand, my parents, me. So I think it was a joint effort. And at the end of the day, I sincerely believe that family deity has blessed me. I remember the fact, like we're talking about a very modern society, Bombay.
Right.
But I remember the fact when people used to come and talk to me, how much of your leg have you lost? Oh, your mother wanted to make you a film star. How unfortunate.
They would say this upfront?
Yes, I've heard all this. And that is the reason why I wanted to prove. And I knew my parents, I won't say that they were ashamed of me, no. But somewhere every father and mother dreams something for the child. So they used to feel very disappointed that one child, but unfortunately this happened. And I remember my mother going out to the market to get vegetables after 8 in the evening because she didn't want to meet people who asked her stupid questions.